The first time anyone noticed the record, the clerk stopped breathing for a moment. Not because it was dramatic, not because it was loud, but because it was wrong. A county birth ledger from rural Ohio, dated 1847 to 1861. Thick paper, brown with age. Names written in careful ink. Mothers listed. Birth dates listed. Places listed. And then, no fathers. Not one. Not for 3 children. Not for 5. But for 36. Same woman. Same handwritten name. Again, and again, and again. By the end of the page, the ink looked pressed too hard, as if the writer had been angry or afraid. The woman's name was Eliza Ward. She had no death record, no marriage record, no census listing after 1862. Just children. Children born every year. Sometimes twice in the same year. The clerk later said the room felt colder when he reached the last entry. Not in a dramatic way, just a quiet wrongness, like a door left open somewhere deep in the building. The final note, written smaller than the rest, read, "Child delivered under supervision." No doctor named. No father named. No explanation. That ledger should have been destroyed. Most records like it were. But this one survived. And it leads to a town that no longer exists. A church that was erased. And a woman whose body became a system. This is not a story about scandal. It is a story about ownership. The town was called Hollow Creek. It sat off a trade road that no longer appears on modern maps. In the 1800s, it was described as quiet, God-fearing, and disciplined. The kind of place outsiders passed through but never stayed long. White church at the center. Orphan house behind it. Gravel paths kept neat. No saloons. No jail. The church records show something strange. Very few marriages. Very many births. Children baptized in groups. Sometimes 10 at once. All listed as wards of the church. Not orphans. Not abandoned. Just wards. Sermons from that time spoke often about purity. About sacrifice. About obedience. About women as vessels chosen by God. And always, always about silence. Visitors wrote that the women of Hollow Creek rarely spoke to strangers. That they kept their eyes down. That they walked in lines on Sundays. One traveler wrote in his journal, "They look rehearsed. Like a play that never ends." Eliza Ward does not appear in town photos. But her children do. Dozens of children with the same eyes. Same narrow jaw. Same quiet stare. The church kept them. The town raised them. And no one asked where they came from. Eliza Ward was born in 1829. Her early life is almost blank. No school records. No baptism entry. No family plot. The first time her name appears, she is 14. Listed as received by the church. Not adopted. Not hired. Received. From that point on, she lived behind the church in a small attached residence. Records describe her as obedient, healthy, and capable. They never describe her as human. The births begin 1 year later. There is no gap. No recovery time. No pause. Her body became routine. Each birth is noted like inventory. Weight. Time. Condition. The same phrase repeats. Mother stable. Never well. Never resting. Never recovering. Just stable. One church letter mentions that Eliza struggled with prayer after her 7th child. Another notes she was corrected. After the 15th birth, her signature disappears from all records. From that point on, she is referred to only as the woman. In 1862, a circuit judge named Thomas Bell passed through Hollow Creek. He was reviewing property disputes after the war disrupted county borders. He requested church documents, birth records, census logs. He noticed the pattern immediately. 36 children. 1 woman. No fathers. He asked the pastor to explain. The pastor smiled. Said the children were blessings. Said the fathers were not relevant. Said Eliza was devoted. The judge asked to see her. They delayed him for 3 days. When he finally met Eliza Ward, witnesses later said she did not look up. Not once. Judge Bell wrote in his private journal, "She does not speak unless spoken to." When asked her age, she answered incorrectly. When asked how many children she had borne, she paused and said, "All of them." The judge demanded a private inquiry. It never happened. 2 weeks later, Hollow Creek burned. Official reports say it was an accident. Judge Bell resigned within the year. Eliza Ward vanished, and the children were relocated to orphanages, seminaries, and families that never knew where they truly came from. But something followed them. Something learned in that church. Something born with them. On paper, the children of Hollow Creek were relocated. That word appears again and again in county files after the fire. Relocated, reassigned, transferred, never adopted. Most were sent to church-run orphanages across Ohio, Indiana, and Pennsylvania. A few were placed with farming families. Some were sent far away, to seminaries and training schools. They were separated carefully, never more than 2 together, never with anyone who asked questions. But something followed them. Orphanage journals described the same behavior patterns. Children who did not cry. Children who woke at the same hour every night. Children who stood in rows without being told. One matron wrote, "They wait, even when there is nothing to wait for." Several reports mention children whispering numbers in their sleep, always counting forward, never backward. One boy, age 9, carved words into his bed frame before being moved again. The words were simple. "She is tired." No record shows anyone asking who she was. In 1868, an orphanage outside Dayton closed its lower floor. Official reason, flooding. But inspection reports show no water damage. What they do show is reinforcement. New locks, thicker doors, windows sealed from the inside. This orphanage had taken in 7 children from Hollow Creek. Within 6 months, 3 staff members quit without notice. One left behind a letter. "I cannot watch them line themselves up anymore. I cannot hear them pray without being told. I feel like I am being watched by something that already knows me." The children were not violent. They were obedient. Too obedient. They corrected adults when prayers were spoken wrong. They refused to eat until everyone was seated. They punished each other silently for small mistakes. No one taught them that. The basement was sealed after a night watchman claimed he heard singing below the floor. Soft, steady, female. The children said it was for her. Years later, fragments of Hollow Creek's church doctrine surfaced in private collections. Not sermons, not hymns, instructions, pages written in the same hand across decades. They spoke of continuity, of purity of line, of the vessel. One passage reads, "She must not know the count. Knowledge weakens acceptance." Another, "The Father's dilute purpose." The children were never meant to belong to families. They were meant to belong to the system. Each child was marked at birth with a small cut near the shoulder. Not enough to scar badly, just enough to recognize later. Doctors called it superstition, but midwives knew better. It was ownership. Eliza Ward does not appear in records after the fire, but she appears in dreams. That sounds dramatic. It isn't. Multiple descendants of Hollow Creek children reported the same figure. A woman seated, head lowered, hands folded, always counting, always tired. One man, interviewed in the 1930s, said his grandmother, one of the children, used to whisper before bed, "Don't wake her. She hasn't rested yet." There is one final document, a court note, and signed, dated 1871. It reads, "The woman expired during continuation. Assets preserved. No burial record exists. No grave. No marker. Just children who grew up feeling watched by something that had already given everything it had, and had never been allowed to stop." By the early 1900s, the children of Hollow Creek were no longer children. They became teachers, farmers, nurses, clergy assistants. On the surface, they lived normal lives. But doctors noticed patterns. Women descended from Hollow Creek had unusually difficult pregnancies, long labor, extreme exhaustion. Many described feeling like their bodies were not fully theirs. Some said they felt watched when they slept. Some said they dreamed of counting. Men from the same bloodline showed different signs. They avoided hospitals. They avoided childbirth. They avoided staying in one place too long. Several vanished without records. It was as if something inside them knew where not to settle. Thomas Bell did not speak publicly after Hollow Creek, but he kept notes, boxes of them. After his death, his granddaughter found them hidden behind a false wall. Journals, letters, maps of towns connected by adoption routes. He had tracked the children, not to protect them, but to understand what he had interrupted. One entry reads, "They were building permanence through repetition, not faith, not bloodlines, a living mechanism." Another, "She was never meant to be remembered, only used." Bell tried to bring a case in 1870. No witnesses came forward. Every church involved denied knowledge, and every orphanage claimed the children arrived already trained. Bell wrote one final sentence before stopping. "I believe the woman was not allowed to die. The grandchildren of Eliza Ward were born across the country. Different names, different towns, same symptoms. Children who lined up toys in rows. Children who corrected adults gently but firmly. Children who hummed songs no one taught them. A schoolteacher in Illinois reported a girl who refused to sit unless the entire class was seated first. When asked why, the girl said, "So no one carries it alone." No one knew what it was, but the feeling spread. A quiet pressure, a need to obey something unnamed. Psychologists called it inherited trauma. But trauma does not usually organize itself. In 1919, a nurse working in a maternity ward wrote a private letter. She described a patient descended from Hollow Creek. During labor, the woman whispered numbers. When asked what she was counting, she said, she never got to finish. The baby survived. The mother did not. Hospital staff reported the room felt relieved afterward. Not happy, just released. That night, 3 nurses dreamed of the same thing. A woman standing up for the first time, and then sitting back down. By the 1920s, the institutions that once protected the secret were weakening. Small churches closed. Orphanages lost funding. Records were moved, misplaced, or destroyed. And with that loss of control, the pattern started to slip. Descendants of Hollow Creek began to speak. Not loudly, not clearly, but enough. A woman in Kentucky told a doctor she felt like her body was borrowed. A man in Missouri refused to marry because he said, "It won't stop with me." Several families reported the same argument passing through generations. You don't know what we were made for. No one could explain where that idea came from. It wasn't taught. It was remembered. In 1927, a small church outside Cincinnati attempted to document its past. They had received Hollow Creek children decades earlier. At the time, they didn't ask questions. They were told not to. A young pastor, newly appointed, found locked drawers in the church office. Inside were copied pages from Hollow Creek's doctrine. Not the sermons, the instructions. He tried to bring them to the state. Within weeks, the church burned. Official cause, faulty wiring. The pastor survived, but he stopped speaking about what he found. He later told his wife only one sentence. She wasn't the beginning. For generations, the dreams were the same. A woman seated, counting, never looking up. But now, the dreams shifted. Descendants reported the woman standing, walking slowly, stopping as if unsure where to go. Some dreamed she reached the end of a long room and found a door. Others dreamed she touched a child's shoulder and whispered something no one could hear. After these dreams, people changed. Some felt lighter. Some felt empty. Some felt afraid for the first time. One man wrote in a letter, "I think she's waking up, and I don't know what that means for us." In 1938, a woman in rural Indiana gave birth alone. She was a direct descendant of Eliza Ward. No midwife arrived in time. When neighbors found her, the child was alive. The mother was dead, but her face was calm, not exhausted, not strained, peaceful. The doctor who signed the certificate added a note he never explained. Cause of death unclear. Labor appeared complete. After that year, the pattern stopped. No more counted births. No more whispers of numbers. No more shared dreams. As if something had finally reached the end, or been released. Eliza Ward was never meant to be a person. That is the hardest truth in the records. She was not punished for sin. She was not hidden because of shame. She was designed. The church writings make this clear when read together. They never describe her thoughts, never describe her fear, only her function. She was called the vessel, the continuation, the anchor. They believed that if one woman carried everything, the pain, the births, the exhaustion, then the rest could remain clean. Families stayed intact. Men stayed blameless. The town stayed pure. All corruption was poured into one body. And Eliza accepted it, not because she wanted to, but because she was never given the words to refuse. The absence of fathers was not a mystery. It was policy. The doctrine stated that identity weakened obedience. That lineage created attachment. That love created resistance. By removing fathers, the children belonged only to the system. By removing names, responsibility vanished. The men involved were not unknown. They were simply protected. Their names were recorded elsewhere. In private ledgers. In coded initials. In confessionals that were never written down. Eliza carried their actions so they did not have to. That was the bargain. The dream stopped after 1938 for a reason. The final descendant completed what Eliza could not. Not another birth. An ending. Doctors later said the woman died peacefully because her body let go. But the records suggest something else. That the count reached zero. That the weight was passed back to the earth. That Eliza Ward, for the first time, was no longer needed. And so she stood, and walked, and left. Hollow Creek was erased because it worked. That is the most disturbing part. No riots. No screams. No mass graves. Just quiet compliance. The kind that builds institutions. The kind that survives for generations. Eliza Ward's name remains only because someone forgot to destroy one book, one ledger, one mistake. And if you feel uneasy now, that's normal. Because this story is not about the past. It is about how easily suffering can be organized, as long as one person carries it for everyone else. And how long it takes for the world to notice when she finally disappears.